All right, closing the book on week one of the glorious thing that is the 2024 college football season. Now, some of you are saying, JD, it wasn't so glorious for my team. I understand that, but think about it this way. It could always be worse. You could be making promises about things you will do if your team loses, and now having the entire college football media world coming after you. I say college football media, college football social media world coming after you. Also, you could be dealing with a certain television provider that isn't carrying the games at this point in time during the college football season. With all that out of the way now, we're here to talk about the beautiful things in college football, or for the most part at least. It is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. This is the Hard Count, the People's College Football Show. We are not too naive to think that you have known about this show for forever. If you are just now finding us for college football season, welcome. It means you're probably a college football sicko if you found this show. Go ahead and subscribe to be a part of all the madness that goes on this platform that is the On3 YouTube channel. Andy and Ari on 3 just got off the air this morning. They're on every single weekday. Again, if you're a college football sicko, this is your place. So Tuesdays is when we do our predictions for the week that is upon us. Now, week one is a little bit different, okay? A little bit of a different schedule. Had a Monday game last night. So we have a couple of things here to put out to pasture before we move on to the predictions in week two. I'll tell you what now, we got a beautiful slate. Week one was sensational in terms of the matchups we had. Week two, it's not really too much of a fall off at all. You got Michigan and Texas, big noon action there. You got Nebraska, Colorado. Can I just say this? I love so much that game is relevant, has meaning, and will be watched by a lot of people. That is college football at its finest, in my opinion, when both those schools are having a game that matters. Also, South Carolina, Kentucky. South Carolina having to, put on the Jets a little bit there at the end to beat Old Dominion in week one. You had Kentucky not even playing a full fourth quarter game against Southern Miss. Still, a win's a win. It doesn't matter how many quarters you play. Also, one more game here. We got Tennessee and NC State. This one being played in Charlotte. Nico Iamaleava, if you were trying to slow down the hype train for number 8 out there in Knoxville, last week did zero favors to anybody, threw for over 300 yards in the first half. So we've got a lot to break down here, a lot of predictions to make, but as I mentioned, a couple of things to jump into before that, okay? So let's start with this. Hits and misses from the week that was. We kind of go rapid fire here. Basically, the whole point of this segment, any great team that I've ever been a part of, they are big on accountability. Okay, that is what provides a winning operation, is making sure you are accountable to yourself, to your teammates, and to y'all, the audience. So here's the deal. Here's what we hit on. Here's what we missed on. I believe that we hit, now I know we hit, on our call on Georgia and Clemson. We said, hey, listen, put the house on Georgia with that 13.5. Georgia covered that with ease. They're one of the best rosters, one of the best teams in all of college football. They were versatile in the first half and second half. They absolutely bodied Clemson. I'm not telling you Clemson's a bad team, but I am telling you Georgia proved yet again that they will be a force, surprise, surprise, across the entirety of this college football season. Now, here's what we missed on. And this was probably the worst miss of the entire week one for yours truly. I said, hey, Cam Ward's going to walk into the swamp, and I think Cam Ward and Miami, I think they're a college football playoff outfit. I do. But going to the swamp, man, we've seen teams walk in there, experienced teams walk in there and crumble. Cam Ward's first start for the Canes, I think it's close, but I think that the atmosphere is too much for him. Y'all, hey, I told y'all, when we're wrong, we eat crow. Okay, so we were way wrong on this. Y'all, Cam Ward, to the tune of 385 yards. He was out there just so nonchalantly, he was playing two-hand touch football at someone's barbecue. So, crow for us. Nick Brake asked me to keep the mic kind of far from my face when I eat the crow. That's a big helping of crow for us. Cam Ward, he's different. I don't know what's up with his brain, but he's different. Looks like he was not impacted at all by that atmosphere. In fact, he was playing, like I said, just backyard football with his buddies. So he was unconscious. Miami is going to be a force in 2024. So another hit we had. Put the crow to aside for a quick second here. Notre Dame's defense was the difference in that game against Texas A&M. We said it all week. Salty outfit. It's a bunch of grad students, Got Portal on the brain. Grad students and Benjamin Morrison pretty much locked it up. And if you look at what they did defensively, it wasn't like they were being super complex schematically. contrary to what actually happened on the field. All they did was say, we're going to play man coverage on the back end. We're going to get downhill in the box. See if you can beat us. Texas A&M, of course, did not make that happen. Notre Dame was the difference, Notre Dame's defense was the difference, as well as Jeremiah Love. I mean, guy is just a big play waiting to happen. He made the ultimate big play to win the football game. Back to the misses here. We said that we thought West Virginia was going to beat Penn State in Morgantown. Pat McAfee's on campus. You know, the atmosphere is electric. You hear so many different coaches talk about how difficult it is to play in Morgantown. And Penn State, now, God bless them, last year they were nowhere near what the definition of explosive is offensively. And I don't think we've seen their best just yet, but seeing them go and score 34 points. See Drew Aller go for 3 touchdowns, lead that drive at the end of the first half. We were way wrong on that one. So we'll have a little bit of crow for that one. Penn State, explosive as all get out, or explosive enough at least in that game, and they changed the entire game. So some crow for that. Drew Aller. I'm just saying now, Drew Aller, he'll be a Heisman guy. I'm just saying, it's week 1, but if they're throwing the ball like that, could be a Heisman guy. If we hit on this one, Jalen Milroe, I know it was Western Kentucky. It was the Fighting Nick Breaks. I'm not trying to dunk on Western Kentucky here, but you score 63 points against anybody. You're a good offense, okay? Now, Jalen Milroe, if that's just the jumping off point for him, he's going to have a huge year for Kalen DeBoer and company. Counted for 5 total touchdowns. And it was overall just like how comfortable he looked in that system, too, that I thought was encouraging. Like he was, I said it on our Sunday reaction videos, like he was the point guard dictating the pace of the offense. He looked in total control. He had no inkling of, oh, where am I going with the football? Oh, what do I do in this situation? Like, and I understand, again, the level of competition wasn't tremendous, but overall, how smooth he looked. It looked like it played exactly to his skill set. We think we hit on Jalen Milroe being a Heisman finalist this year. So we'll go ahead and leave it at that. Last one here, and I'm gonna have the crow right here. I don't think we need to eat it just yet, because I don't know that we were that far off on this. USC and LSU, we said, hey, the defenses will be improved. I picked LSU in that game because I thought ultimately the LSU offense had too many playmakers for USC to keep up with. So at the end of the day, man, I thought that USC's defense would be better. I didn't think it would come together like that. And what we said during our one-off video yesterday on the On3 YouTube channel, another reason to be subscribed, USC defensively over the course of however many years has been making like changes, but the changes you make when like you're on a trendy diet, like, oh, hey, I'm going to cut out, I mean, people cut out weird things all the time. I'm going to cut out vegetables this week. I'm going to go only carnivore diet. Like, okay, cool. That's kind of weird, but if that makes you feel good, you think that's going to help? Like, awesome. More power to you. USC defensively, from what I can tell, with how they played against LSU, allowing 20 points, they've made lifestyle changes on that side of the football. Like, there's nothing trendy or one-offy about it from what I can tell. They played great assignment-sound football. They tackled in the open field. They all rallied to the football. Like, that was just unrecognizable when it came to what last year's defense was last year and what they were on Sunday night under Dantlin and that new defensive staff. So overall, man, LSU and USC was a great game, but USC, that defense was the difference. And we'll call it a miss there because we did pick the wrong team. So hits and misses, accountability is key. We appreciate y'all for helping us stay accountable because a lot of y'all let us know where we were wrong on the socials as well. So listen, this crow isn't going anywhere. We're going to keep this crow right here. Like I mentioned, this Tuesday prediction show, a little bit unorthodox. Right now, we would typically jump right into the predictions for the week. But a game happened last night that I wasn't so sure we would have to talk about until, I guess, it got to halftime and we saw what Boston College was doing to Florida State. I don't want to take anything away from Boston College. Final score in Tallahassee, mind you, was Florida State 13, Boston College 28. Y'all, Boston College, if they had wanted to, they could have scored again. They could have scored again, and they could have really made it a little bit ugly. Took a knee within like the 10-yard line of Florida State. And Boston College was the enforcer. They ran the football well. Castellanos, I mean, whatever his rating is on College Football 25, they probably need to tweak it a little bit more to make him a cheat code like he was last night. But I think Florida State is the massive talking point this morning because this is the second week in a row now we have seen Florida State manhandled in the trenches. Just absolutely manhandled it. And honestly, like, the frustrating part is, like, if you're a Florida State fan, you're looking back at all the things people like myself were saying about Florida State and the defensive line and the trenches and how tough they would be. Like, this is nowhere near what we were advertised when it comes to Florida State. Like, this is not even close to what I think they have on the roster. And that's the frustrating part. Like, everything that we were told they would be, they haven't been. And DJU, and he's someone we've talked about a lot on this show, he's going to get a ton of blame. Some of that is very warranted. He missed some throws last night you just cannot miss, brother. Like, back corner of the end zone, end of the first half, we need points, guys wide open, you got to connect there. Everyone makes mistakes, but at the same time, you're going to be held to a certain standard, especially when you've played as much college football as he has, especially when you have the track record he has. Like, there's not going to be a whole lot of margin for error with DJU. So he is definitely due his fair share of the blame. No question about it. But I keep going back to this point. Quarterback, quite frankly, is the least of your worries right now if you're Florida State. Like, I don't think it matters who you have playing quarterback. I saw stuff on social media last night about, is it time for Brock Glenn? I'm like, throw him in there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you're getting outrushed 263-21. Put Tom Brady back there. You have 21 yards rushing to another team's 263. You're getting beat. You're getting beat. Also, we were told, hey, the culture of Florida State. I thought the culture of Florida State would be substantially better. They were not disciplined. They had 7 penalties. And the thing that probably would irk you the most if you're a Florida State fan, outside of the anemic offensive output, outside of getting just beat like a drum in the trenches, both sides of the line of scrimmage, what should irk you is the fact that you got horrific body language all over the field. And I'm talking about before this game was even the beat down that it was. Like, we got guys doing the whole palms up, say, hey, I don't know, it's not my fault, what's going on, what are we doing here? We got guys not chasing down Boston College on the interception, guys just giving, the equivalent of, like, lip service, just walking, like just doing it to do it, just walking after the guy after he intercepts it. We got guys just giving up on we got guys walking off the field after they get scored on. Like, that was unrecognizable from what last year's Florida State team was. And so I think if you look at, like, the roster, Florida State has no business losing a game like that. They don't. You say, well, JD, they got outrushed by darn near like 240 yards. 100% true. But the guys that Florida State has on their roster should not be getting beat like that against Florida State. There's no way. Or against Boston College, rather. There's no way. So, with that being said, when you talk about Florida State going forward now, as the head coach, much like DJ, you being the quarterback, if you're the head coach, you're Mike Norvell, like, you're going to receive your fair share of the blame. No way around it. And I think a lot of people are going to say, well, the portal strategy, is that the right way to go about doing business? Through 2 games so far, they have earned that talking point. I also think it would be a little bit inappropriate of us to not at least acknowledge that over the course of the last 2 years, Mike Norvell has gone 23-4 with this same portal strategy. So what changed? Head coach is the same. Strategy is the same. Yeah, you probably missed in the portal in the way that you hit the last couple of seasons. There's no Keon Coleman or a Johnny Wilson or a Jaheim Bell. Like, yeah, that's definitely true. But the thing that I'm looking at with Florida State that I can't totally square is, like, okay, head coach, I think, is trying to install a good culture. I think he's trying to set the right bar. And the coaching staff can only do so much. Like, for me, who is the leader in this locker room? And I'm not saying that to try and, like, pick on any one player. I'm just saying, like, genuinely, who is the person that will draw a line in the sand and say, this is not okay, regardless of the results? I'm talking about, like, the effort, the body language, the execution, the penalties, all those things. Like, Mike Norvell, as good of a coach as he's been the last 2 years, he cannot want it for this locker room. The best teams, the best cultures are coach-led, player-fed. Okay, the players are the ones that actually execute in the leadership side of things. So, honestly, like, we talked a lot about Florida State being a college football playoff team, and I told you last Sunday, like, hey, don't turn the lights out on Florida State just yet. Don't turn the lights out. Honestly, like, I think the question isn't so much more like, what can they do in the postseason? Because that, to me, feels like a very ambitious goal at this point in time, starting out 0-2 in ACC play, 0-2 on the season. I think it's a legitimate question. Can they make a bowl game? And I'm not here to overreact, but, like, they still got some tough ones left on the schedule if they want to make a bowl game. And if they're allowing 200 yards rushing, I think that's a very, very fair question for us to ask at this point in time, because it is a very, very difficult formula they're working with right now. They're not multidimensional offensively. They can't stop anybody on the ground. Their body language and their attitude when they start getting beat does not seem like a winning formula. Somebody's got to step up in that locker room and be a leader. And so, I mean, this is kind of the cherry on top now. If you're 3-2-1 null, there has been a more or less a manhunt that is after this man right now from what he promised to do if Florida State were to lose to Boston College. For those of y'all that have no idea what I'm talking about, here's the Spark Notes. Florida State fan on Twitter after the loss to Georgia Tech says, if we lose to Boston College, I will eat a cup of dog feces and I will do it live on Twitter or something like that. He has since deleted his Twitter, and all of college football social media is now trying to track this man down. So it could always be worse, is what I'm trying to tell you right now. It could always be worse. You could be in that guy's shoes, but right now, man, the discussion is no longer is Florida State a team that can be in the college football playoff. I think last night made it pretty clear that's not the case. The discussion for me is like, can they salvage this thing and become a bowl team? All right? So that's crow for me. I would eat more crow. Unfortunately, it was in the shot, so I think Nick Brake went and snagged it off the air because he's trying to make sure we have a professional-looking product here, and that was interfering. So bottom line, Florida State, I don't recognize what I'm seeing out there. I don't recognize, and I don't think the folks in Tallahassee do either. So we move right along. Hey, Nick, hand up. That's on me. I should have moved that a little bit over here, but nonetheless, we keep on going. Okay, so again, kind of a unique Tuesday show, unpacking the Monday that was. But that just about closes the book for us here on week one of the college football season. It's beautiful. And everyone gets juiced up for week one. Everyone gets excited to see football again, and we're all, engaged for that first week. But who's locked in after all the dust settles, after it becomes a week in and week out thing? If you're watching this show, I believe that's you. So if you're watching right now, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you so much for that. If you're listening on podcast, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast feed. It's college football, nothing but college football. So we appreciate you for that. This is going to be awesome. We got Michigan. We got Texas in Ann Arbor. Texas favored by 6.5 points. Big noon. It's on Fox. Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson on the call. I cannot wait for this one, man. Cannot wait for this one. This is one of those games that way back in like March, after we were starting to come off of that high that was the college football season, you start looking to the schedule ahead of you. Well, hey, what's week one? What's week two look like? This is one of those games that you circled early on. You're like, oh boy, when that gets here, that will be special. Now for Michigan, took care of business against Fresno State. Looks like it's the Davis Warren show for them. And I think there's still a lot of question marks around them. And I think a lot of those are well-deserved. Like I say, take care of business against Fresno State. They won the game. I don't think they looked all that dominant. I think they're still trying to get their footing overall as a football team with a lot of new faces in the lineup for them. But if you beat Texas, a team that's now in the SEC, a team that made the college football playoff last year and won the Big 12, a team that has one of the best quarterbacks in college football, one of the best head coaches in college football, I would argue one of the better rosters in college football, I think you get to stamp yourself as Michigan and say, hey, we're still one of those teams that you have to deal with in this landscape. We're still one of the big dogs. So a win against Texas at the crib would, in a lot of ways, I think, kind of start the playoff buzz around Michigan in a very, very real way with what they have ahead of them. Now for Texas, remember last year where Texas went to Tuscaloosa? And I'm not talking about the game. Think about all the talking points that were surrounding that football team as we were getting ready for that game to happen. College game day, and people are picking Alabama, and there's, an absolute scene out there on the quad in Tuscaloosa. We were actually at that game and at college game day for that one. But when Texas won that game on the road, that felt like the okay, we've arrived moment under Steve Sarkisian. And even more so, I think that provided a lot of belief internally for that locker room. They're like, okay, we are exactly who we've been saying we are throughout the course of this past offseason. For Texas, a lot of the same faces that went to Tuscaloosa are still on this roster. But I think for them in this new year, like this game could be what last year's Alabama game was for them on the road, week 2. Should be a great environment, big brand. It'll be fun. So for Texas, a chance to kind of get the party started in 2024. Keys to the game here, man. We always break it down from a football perspective, kind of a schematic perspective, if you will. Texas and Steve Sarkisian, if you know anything about Sark's offense, man, he loves the RPO. And you've heard a million different color analysts trying to explain to you the run-pass option. You already know what that means. But essentially, Texas, what they want to do to be able to throw the football is run the football. So can they put the R in the RPO? They ran the football well last week. I think Jaden Blue proved to a lot of the college football public that he is going to be able to carry the load. But the question in this one now, Michigan's, I believe, strength of their defense is in the interior. Pete Thamel a couple of weeks ago came out and said he believes Florida State is the best defensive line in college football. Now, since then, it has been proven untrue, and honestly, when he said it, I didn't disagree. But you look at Michigan, what they have in the interior, they have a pretty strong case to make for themselves as one of the best defensive lines in college football. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, they were flying around was that defense. And so, for me, the question is, can Texas get enough going on the ground to where they can then set up some of those shots downfield? And if they can, well, that shifts the conversation then. Because then we're asking, okay, well, can Texas as a whole and that wide receiver core win consistently enough against those Michigan DBs? Now, there's the names that you know. Will Johnson, who's, I think, arguably, if not definitively, the best cornerback in college football. The battle with him and Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden, like that's going to be one that I think is box office kind of stuff. And there's a couple of questions I have when it comes to like this battle. I think it's two-faceted. The first is man coverage. Because as much as, Michigan proved a point against Fresno State, holding them to what they held them to, and Will Johnson having that pick six to kind of seal the deal, there was a couple of snaps there where you're like, hey, Fresno State, in man coverage, they won that rep. They didn't finish every single time, but like they won enough of those to make you say, if Fresno State can win in man coverage, can Texas? Like Texas should have better wide receivers than Fresno State, have a better quarterback than Fresno State, and that's not me dunking on Fresno State. Those are just the facts. I also think that Michigan was probably pretty vanilla in their scheme against Fresno State, so what we saw from them defensively in that game I think will be very different in this game. I'd be curious to see how much safety help they provide for this wide receiver core against Texas. So that's the first part of this. Can you play man coverage against Texas? And if you can, well, guess what you get to do? Provide more resources to stopping the run. That safety gets to roll down a little bit more quickly. You get to fill a little more quickly. You get to be able to play more in the box against Texas, which, again, would put more pressure on the pass game. The second part of this battle between Texas and Michigan is what happens in space between Michigan and Texas. Like, Texas has some yak monsters, from what I can tell. Like, Isaiah Bond is great. Matthew Golden is great. Silas Bolden, we saw run with, it looked like some of the twos against Colorado State. We'll see if that's the case. Like, they've got a lot of guys, though, to put it simply. Ryan Wingo had a big day. Like, they've got a lot of guys to where if you get them the ball in space, they have a habit of winning. Okay, so for Michigan, you got to be able to play and be able to put it simply, you got to be able to tackle. You got to be able to get these guys on the ground, because if you can just quick game a team to death, like I think Texas will try to do at certain points throughout this game, and make that an explosive play, meaning you take a 3-yard slant route into a 35-yard gain and a first down, that's winning football. That makes Quinn Ewers' job a whole heck of a lot easier. So that's going to be huge. Watch that matchup. The matchup, I think, for Michigan when they have the football is their attitude getting downhill versus this Texas interior defensive line. Because last year, that was kind of the calling card for Texas. They got Devondre Sweat. They got Byron Murphy. Like, those two dudes are All-Americans. They're gone in the NFL. That's the problem, though. They're gone to the NFL. Texas, as much as I believe in what they have on the defensive line, they're going to have their work cut out for them. Because if we know one thing about Michigan, doesn't matter if Jim Harbaugh's there, doesn't matter if Blake Corum's there, they are going to run the football and attack you. Not just for the first quarter. Like, when Michigan starts breaking open those wide runs, those runs that go for like 40, 50 yards, usually happens in like third, fourth quarter where they've worn you down. So my question is, can Texas bring enough to the party to be able to force the game onto Davis Warren? Because Davis Warren now, as good as I think he can be for Michigan, I'm curious what they ask of him in this game. Because I fully expect Texas, again, to sell out, to stop the run. When that happens, you put the ball in 16's hands and ask him to push it downfield. Not saying he can't do it, but I do think that's the world you want to live in if you're Texas. Make the first-year starting quarterback in his second game as a starter try and beat you. Curious to see, too, if there is struggles offensively for Michigan, do they give Alex Orji a few more snaps? You would hope in a game like this, you toss the keys to QB1 Davis Warren and just kind of let him ride, play through his mistakes, whatever it may be. But curious to see how much margin for error they allow him early on in this game. Now, here's the other thing. This, to me, screams a pace game. Screams pace game. Whoever controls the tempo of this game, I think, has a more than decent shot at winning it. And what I mean by that is Michigan, they want to make this a wrestling match. They want to make it slow, methodical, got you in a sleeper hold, wore out there for 5-6 minutes at a time, 10-12 play drive. Quinn Ewers got to watch a lot of this one. Like, we want to play this game in the teens and the 20s. If that happens, I think Michigan feels pretty good about their chances if they can slow the game down. Now, to be honest with you, the game may end up in the teens and 20s just because of the sheer fact that I think Michigan will slow the game down overall. So we'll see how many possessions Texas gets to begin with. But Texas, they want to play like an MMA, a boxing kind of style of game where they're trading haymakers, quick strike, force you to keep up with them. That would be the kind of game that I think Texas wants to play. Now, also, I'll say this. Within that whole pace that Texas wants to play at, Michigan could be very much so feast or famine in the way they try to attack him. Wink Martindale, formerly a DC at the NFL level, he is known for trying to bring complex pressures and make quarterbacks uncomfortable in that sense. Quinn Ewers, going into his third year as a starter at Texas, this is the game now where you need to play like a third-year starter at Texas. Played great last year on the road in Tuscaloosa. I think that experience serves him well in this game. But if Michigan's able to kind of rattle his cage a little bit, wreak some havoc, create some turnovers, things could get very, very interesting in Ann Arbor. All right? So keep an eye on that and how he handles a lot of the window dressing from that Michigan defense early on, because they were vanilla last week. They will not be vanilla in this game with the Michigan defense. If Texas can't stop Michigan's run game, it's going to be a very slow death. Again, it'll be just grind it out. It'll be Mullings. It'll probably have some Orgy sprinkled in there. It'll be a lot of Edwards. Like, it will be a vintage Michigan win if Texas cannot stop the run. However, I think that Texas and their experience in this situation, having played in big spots, especially Quinn Ewers having won on the road, having won the Big 12, having played in the college football playoff game, even if he lost it, I think that probably helps him in this situation, having played under those bright lights. I think the quantity of Texas weapons on the perimeter, as good as Will Johnson is, as good as Zeke Berry is, I cannot get out of my mind the wins one-on-one in man coverage that Fresno State got last week against Michigan. Would not shock me in the slightest if Michigan found a way to get this done. That feels like it would be the most Michigan thing of all time. Just everyone's counting them out and they find a way to get it done. However, I think overall the matchups to me favor Texas. I think the flow of the game favors Texas. The experience favors Texas. For that reason, I'm taking the Horns to go into Ann Arbor and get a win 24-17. So we'll take Texas to win by a half point. If you can get it 6.5, we'll take Texas to cover, and we'll roll that way with it. So Texas getting done. I don't feel good about that one, y'all. I don't, but we'll roll with Texas. All right, before we get to these next predictions, I want to let y'all know that the hard count is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Now, PrizePicks, we had a good first week now. We appreciate a lot of y'all being dialed in, using our promo code. That's a great way to support the show. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, PrizePicks is daily fantasy, super straightforward, really easy to withdraw your winnings, easy to play, very, very comprehensive. To put it simply, PrizePicks has a massive board, all the sports, okay? We exclusively on this show play college football. Last week, we picked Connor Wegman and Riley Leonard to have more on half a touchdown pass. Now, both of those missed. That's on us. We're just gathering data right now. We're going to bounce back. Honestly, at this point, if you want to fade us, more power to you. However, if you want to play, though, along with us, you can redeem code HARDCOUNT at prizepicks.com. You play $5 in lineups. I mean, you're probably gonna find $5 at some point throughout this week around the house. You play that $5 in lineups, you get $50 in promo funds just for playing. Okay, so lock in with us this week. We'll have a ton of different plays, different lineups on the board for you. We'll talk about them on this show. So PrizePicks, bring you the hard count again. Code HARDCOUNT, $5 lineup, get you $50 in promo funds, and we'll squeeze the juice out of this college football season together with PrizePicks. We appreciate them. All right, another big game we got on the horizon here. This is a night game. We got Tennessee and NC State. Well, 7:30 Eastern action on ABC, Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. So how much this is a neutral site is probably up for debate. We'll see what it looks like on the broadcast. But for Tennessee, man, this is a game now we've talked about for a long time. This is the game where Nico Iamaleava, in his second start as the guy, this is where I think he proves and this Tennessee team proves how much of a college football playoff chops they have, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying anything about NC State. I'm trying to say more about Nico and his progress and this overall Tennessee's team's progress because they absolutely bodied Chattanooga last week. And Nico Iamaleava, even in a lesser competition setting, he was dealing the pill like a shady pharmacist. If he is definitive and decisive and dialed in like he was against Chattanooga in this game against NC State, the vibes should be and will be very, very high on Rocky Top. Now, that's the thing, though, right? It's a different setting for him. We'll talk more about that in a second, but, this is the biggest spot of his career. How does he handle that? I think how he handles that will tell us a lot about Tennessee's, again, their potential and what their path will be going forward here in terms of what they have to do to make the college football playoff. Now, for NC State, this is one of those games where you have the opportunity, I believe, to go from good to great because the ACC now, especially with what Florida State has done, seems to be very wide open. We'll see what Clemson is. Miami seems like they're going to be a very tough out, but NC State, I'm just saying this right now, seems to be some room near the top of the ACC. Go ahead and put yourself in that conversation. And I get it's not an ACC game, but still, if you want to be a college football playoff team, go beat Tennessee, give yourself a chance in ACC play, and we'll see where you're at the end of this whole thing. So NC State's been knocking on the door of great for a while now, in my opinion. This is their chance to keep it pushing. So keys to the game, man. Can NC State get Nico Iamaleava out of control? Because when we watch Nico against Chattanooga, I just said it a second ago, he looks just the epitome of composed and poised and not rattled. It's one thing to do that against Chattanooga at the crib. It's a whole other thing to do that against a Dave Doeren defense. All right? If I'm NC State, I try to get after him early. I try to disrupt his timing. I try to make him uncomfortable and make him feel like he is seeing ghosts, throw different pictures at him. Because if you can mess with the quarterback and Josh Heupel's offense, that's like disrupting the Wi-Fi. Doesn't mean it's not going to work. Doesn't mean you won't still have some success now and then if you're Tennessee, but it does mean that things aren't going to work how you would like them to, or maybe not good enough to ultimately win the football game. So that's massive. Speeding up Nico is huge. Now, if you're Nico in that situation, we talked so much about his mobility, the way that he's able to throw on the run, the way that he's able to ad-lib and create space with his legs. The temptation for him, I believe, when NC State heats him up, is to try and make the big play downfield because he'll break contain. It'll kind of be like when he was in high school and he just has that feeling of okay, now this is where I'm great. I think for him it's going to be extremely crucial even when you ad-lib, even when the play is broken and you're away from what that first and second read was. Have to make good decisions. Have to. Because the nightmare situation for Tennessee here is Nico breaks contain. He's got green grass in front of him. Thinks he sees someone back across the field, puts the ball in jeopardy, you turn it over, Grayson McCall and company, 1st and 10 going the other way. Can't have that. Instead, just play within yourself, play within the system, keep your eyes downfield for sure, but throwing it away, heck, being the athlete that you are and getting 10, that might be the best situation you can put yourself in if you're Nico Iamaleava. Now, metaphorically and literally, can Tennessee, in return, put the pressure on Grayson McCall? Literally, my question is, can the strength of the Tennessee defense take away the NC State run game? Because Robert and I, the OC for NC State, they want to do a lot of things off play action, off the RPO game, set themselves up for second and manageable, third manageable. If you're able to stonewall the run game, well then in that sense, again, metaphorically, the pressure is on Grayson McCall. As good as Grayson McCall is, I think that NC State wants to avoid from him being just a drop-back passer. Okay, that will favor Tennessee. Now, in a literal sense, you want to be able to heat him up. Like I think we saw against Western Carolina, Grayson McCall looked at times a little bit uncomfortable whenever they were able to bring some juice after him. So keep an eye on that. But again, the strength of Tennessee's defense, don't get it twisted, is that front seven. Like this is the game now. If you're a Tennessee fan, you're saying, hey, James Pierce, cut it loose, brother. Like let him go hunt and get after Grayson McCall. That'd be advantage Tennessee in every single sense of the word. Now, like we talked about from Michigan and Texas, putting pressure on the quarterback in some ways shifts the pressure to the other matchups on the perimeter, which for NC State, like that might be the strength of their football team. Like Kevin Concepcion is a name that I think a lot of ACC football fans know of. He went off against Western Carolina, big-time wide receiver for them. He's great after the catch. They will try to get him the football. The question mark for Tennessee's secondary, or for Tennessee overall, is their secondary. So being able to minimize those big plays downfield is going to be massive to the overall outcome of this game. Like Tennessee, they're going to have their work cut out for them. This is a very, very good NC State wide receiver corps. Now, the thing that could break this whole thing wide open, as I was watching NC State and Tennessee and kind of trying to find the matchups that will ultimately determine the outcome of this game, I don't know that NC State plays the RPO game super well. Like Western Carolina, again, I think NC State was very vanilla in their approach. A lot of teams that played lesser competition week one were very, very, straightforward about how they operated, but like they looked so out of sorts whenever Western Carolina would give them an RPO look, put the ball in the perimeter, or a quarterback run game. Like they looked very lost. So will they watch a lot of tape this week and try and fix that? Absolutely. But if that's the tone setter, I think Tennessee's going to be in real, real good shape. I think Tennessee will attack that early. I think you'll see a lot of Nico-designed quarterback run RPOs where he has a chance to throw it out to the sideline or a chance to go tuck it and run himself, like we saw in the bowl game against Iowa. Like Western Carolina's quarterback ran for, I think, darn near 75 yards, something like that. So expect the Nico-designed run game to be huge in this one. I think that Tennessee's skill players in space will have a massive day. NC State is a super difficult out, but even with that being said, I think Tennessee has too much athleticism on the outside, and I love the front seven of Tennessee against NC State's offensive line. So we're going to take Tennessee to win 31-23. So by that nature, we have Tennessee also covering that 7.5, and that'll be massive. Again, that's huge for the Vols and their playoff hopes, clearing that hurdle. Maybe even more importantly, it's huge for their playoff hopes because of what it would say about Nico playing well in a spot like this. So we'll see what happens there. That'll be a fun one, man. That'll be a very, very fun one. Week 2 is going to tell us a lot. Not going to have the definition on all these teams just yet, but we're going to learn a lot by how number 8 plays in that spot. All right, here's one that may ultimately end up being probably up there with the most watched game of the week, to be honest with you, because of who's playing in it. You got Nebraska minus 7.5 against Colorado. 7:30 Eastern, NBC, Memorial Stadium. This game last year now, Colorado came out of nowhere from that week 1 game against TCU. In week 2, they put a hurting on Nebraska. If you're Nebraska, if you are truly making progress and taking steps forward, you have a coach in year 2 in Deion Sanders and a team in year 2 under him that is in some ways in a similar situation trying to take that next step to being a bowl team. Like, if you're taking those steps forward and you're tracking how you expect to track, you win this football game. Okay, because you haven't gone to the portal the same way that Colorado's had to go to the portal. That's the difference now. You should be overall a more solidified roster, should be all the way dialed in based on what happened last year. If you're taking those steps, both culturally and as a team, on the roster, you win this game. Now for Colorado, kind of on the flip side of that, there seems to be this feeling, and some of it's probably, an internal talking point for them, and some of it's maybe a real thing. They really want to be respected and believed in. And I think everybody wants that. The fact of the matter is, Colorado winning 4 games last year, I don't believe, have earned that respect just yet. And that's not me disrespecting them. I'm just saying if they want to be taken seriously, they want to be believed in, then go prove it. Go leave no doubt in a game that will be the game, I believe, of this whole window. against a team that a lot of folks are picking to maybe be a sneaky Big Ten contender. I don't know if I go that far, but if you want to prove a point, this is your stage to do that, okay? So I'm excited to watch how Colorado responds in that setting. Can Nebraska keep up in the secondary? And when we say can they keep up, I'm talking man, not zone. Because if they have to sit back in zone like North Dakota State did, Jimmy Horn's going for another $150, Travis Hunter's going for another $150, and they will carve them up. Shedeur Sanders will go for over 400 yards. The key to this game to me is, can they play man coverage against the weapons of Colorado? Because if they can, you put a lot more pressure on Shedeur Sanders to consistently put the ball in the right spot. You put a lot more pressure on Colorado's weapons to consistently win one-on-one, and that's the difference. That is the ultimate difference, because if you can play man coverage, you can probably start to heat up Shedeur Sanders a little bit more. Y'all, as good as that Colorado offensive line maybe looked in the box score of that North Dakota State-Colorado game, it was not a situation where they were protecting him the way they need to. There will be some chances now for Nebraska to get after Shedeur. How he handles that, in large part, I believe, will be what he's dealing with on the back end against Nebraska secondary. Now, on the flip side of that, Colorado has got to prove they have something viable up front in the run game. And when I say something viable, I don't mean they got to run for like 200 yards, 100 yards. You just can't have your leading rusher have 20 yards, okay? Like that just cannot be the world you exist in if you're Colorado. Because if that's the case, it's going to be very difficult for them to keep this Nebraska defense off balance. Like, if I'm not worried about you even potentially running the football against our front seven or against our defensive line, again, as Nebraska, we get to be a lot more complex to get after you offensively. Now, again, if they're having to sit back in zone is Nebraska and they can't keep up with Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn, then that might just be the story anyway, much like it was against North Dakota State. But if that's the case, things could get very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, if you're a Nebraska fan, this is probably who you're staking your claim on for your team getting back to a bowl game and maybe doing a lot more than that. Can Dylan Raiola, in a major moment now, his second start ever in college football, he's a true freshman, can he just play clean? Okay, I'm not saying can he go for 3 touchdowns and 400 yards. That'd be great. But can he just play clean? Because last year in this game, you didn't even get to see how your offense stacked up because he kept turning it over. Jeff Sims, the quarterback last year, had 3 turnovers in himself in this game. Okay, Dylan Raiola, you just play clean like you did last week against, let's call a spade here, lesser competition in UTEP, completing 70% of your passes, you're going to be okay. Like, that will be enough, I believe, to win this football game. But if he starts turning it over, if Colorado has a couple of strip sacks or whatever the case is, if he has some turnovers now, you don't want to give extra shots to a Colorado offense that has proven now they're extremely potent, not just for good for Colorado in year 2. No, they're a potent offense, point blank period, especially throwing the football through the air. So you give them extra chances to hurt you like you did last year if you're Nebraska, you'll have a very similar result in Lincoln as you did in Boulder. So at the end of the day, man, I don't think anyone is stopping the passing attack of Colorado. If Shedeur Sanders goes for 300 yards, that's probably about what he should go for. That's not me down on Nebraska's defense. That's just how good he is. The accuracy, the ball placement, the weapons that we've talked about ad nauseum when we talk about Colorado, that is who they are. They will hurt you in the pass game. I don't think you can just totally neutralize it. You can try to slow it down a little bit, but even Nebraska against UTEP now kind of made me nervous. There's a few plays in man coverage where we got UTEP going bombs away and beating us for touchdowns. I'm like, hey, we got to figure that out. So you would hope against a team like Colorado where that's going to be their game, you kind of bring a different approach to the table. But I do think that Dylan Raiola and how multiple he allows this offense to be changes the entire complexion of what this game was from a year ago. I think the wide receiver play also for Nebraska, watching that North Dakota State game, I think Travis Hunter's real good. Outside of that, I think there's a lot of opportunity now for Nebraska's wide receivers to go out and win some jump balls, to go out and be able to pop the top on this defense just a little bit. So I think Nebraska will play complementary. I think that Nebraska now has a quarterback where they can capitalize on what their advantage will be in the trenches. I think Nebraska will run the ball for north of $150, potentially 200 yards against this defense, I think Nebraska wins the game. Now, I will say this. I think it's close. I do not have Nebraska covering. I think Nebraska wins the game 34-31. If you want to beat Colorado, you probably got to score somewhere in that range. If Nebraska scores less than 30, they're going to lose. Okay, just bookmark that. They're going to lose if they score less than 30. But again, we don't think that happens. We think Colorado does not have enough in the trenches to dictate terms to Nebraska, and Dylan Raiola makes the difference as Nebraska gets a huge win. In some ways, I guess you could call it a signature win for Matt Rule at this point in time in his career out there in Lincoln. And the Cornhuskers keep it moving, starting 2-0 on the season. Let me know in the comment section, too, your prediction on that one, because I think we've got a good amount of Colorado fans and Nebraska fans tuned in. So if that's you, we appreciate y'all being locked in. Again, subscribe to the channel. But that's going to be, again, I think that might be the most watched game of the weekend if I had to call it. Now, here's one for, I don't know if it's the sickos crowd. It's a 3:30 Eastern kick. But here's one more that's kind of getting overlooked with Michigan and Texas and Colorado and Nebraska, like Kentucky and South Carolina. Going to be a real, real good game. 3:30 Eastern, ABC, Kroger Field. Kentucky yesterday was a 9.5-point favorite. That has since gone up to 10.5 against South Carolina. Kentucky looked pretty sharp in that opening game. Now, it was Southern Miss, and, they didn't play a full 4 quarters, but nonetheless, Brock Vandergriff, he was spinning it. Barry and Brown, Dane Key getting involved. Demi Sumo Kongbe looked good toting the rock. This one, though, against South Carolina, it can't help but feel like it's got a little personal vibe to it for Coach Stoops. Because remember now, in the last couple of years, there's been, I don't know if it's been so directly pointed at Shane Beamer, but he's more or less had his opinion on Shane Beamer and the way that he carries himself and talking about, putting on a hat and sunglasses and dancing and all that. And then Shane Beamer in the locker room after beating Kentucky throws on the hat, throws on the sunglasses. I personally loved it. I loved the vibe overall, and I would go to war for Shane Beamer, period, just because of the way that he's a player's coach. But even with that being said, I think Kentucky now has a certain edge to them, especially in this game, especially now going 0-for-2 in their last 2 tries. Now for South Carolina, last week against ODU, had to maybe sweat that one out a little bit more than you wanted to. The Lenore Sellers era has started in Columbia. Looked solid, then looked phenomenal, looked solid. Had some first-year starter mistakes, but it is what it is. For South Carolina now, you can put all that ODU talk to rest if you go out and beat a team like Kentucky, who I think a lot of people think is kind of a sneaky team in the SEC. So I'll leave it at that. South Carolina's plan A is going to be run the football, mix it up with how you run the football, but essentially stay on schedule, give it to Rocket Sanders, Lenora Sellers, pull it whenever they try and dive to crash that inside zone game, and we're going to get down that way. We are going to be so versatile doing the same thing, and we're going to be better at that than your defense against that. Pretty straightforward. They're not going to be overwhelmingly, I don't believe, complex in the pass game. They're going to try and dictate terms by running the football. Now, for Kentucky, I don't know how much that's going to work because Deion Walker is a smooth 6'6", 345-pound athlete for them on the defensive line. Kentucky allowed, I think it was somewhere in the range of 5 yards against Southern Miss. It was a ridiculous number, whatever it was. Don't quote me on that rushing number stat against Southern Miss. They look great against Southern Miss stopping the run. Now, stopping Southern Miss and stopping South Carolina with a quarterback in Lenore Sellers who's 6'3", 240, probably different tasks if you catch my drift there, but that's going to be a very big matchup. Because if South Carolina can run the football, well, okay, we got a whole different way to look at this game. And South Carolina may very well go into Kroger Field and leave with a dub if you can't stop them on the ground. However, if Deion Walker has anything to say about it, and that front seven of Kentucky along with Georgia transfer linebacker Jamal Dumas-Johnson has anything to say about it, this game gets a little bit interesting, okay? Because then you force South Carolina to have to throw the football, and that's a whole other can of worms that we don't know what that would look like, quite frankly. So, again, the spread is up to now 10.5. We'll see what it looks like at game time. It'd be very easy to just pick the double-digit favorite, right? There's not a whole lot of, nuance or skill involved in that. If South Carolina were to win this football game, how would that happen? I think you would have to do what I just said, be efficient on offense, be able to run the football. Maybe more specifically, I think you'd have to have something in the pass game as well. Vandrevis Jacobs looked pretty solid against ODU. We'll see how much they feed him the football. Nicholas Harbor is, I mean, let's be real. He's a Olympic sprinter playing receiver for South Carolina. If you can bring him up to speed, involve him in the game plan, and allow him to just maximize his athletic gifts, things could get interesting. That's kind of the whole thing around this for South Carolina. Be able to be efficient on offense and have something in the pass game to set up your run game, or at least keep Kentucky from totally keying on your run game. Now, in addition to that, South Carolina, I think, to win this football game on the road, probably needs to find a way to spot themselves a possession or two. Could see some beamer ball. The thing that I'm looking at is South Carolina's defensive line. I know it was ODU, but like Dylan Stewart, SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week, he's a true freshman. I mean, absolute havoc wreaker off the edge. Had a sack and a half, I believe, last week against ODU. Like, he is one of those guys you point to and say, okay, if we're going to win this game, you have to be special. Maybe it's not just him. Maybe it's other pieces on that South Carolina defense. But, like, you have to disrupt Brock Vandagriff because Kentucky's plan is going to be pretty straightforward. Much like I mentioned South Carolina being pretty straightforward in what they want to do, the same thing is true for Kentucky. They want to get the ball in space to Dane Key and Barry and Brown, and then when you're moving side to side trying to keep up with them, they're going to give the ball to DSK, and he's going to make you pay getting downhill. All right, like Brock Vandagriff, I think, was one of the more under-the-radar gets via the portal for Kentucky, just because you can't get on the field at Georgia when Carson Beck, the number one quarterback in America, is in front of you. Shouldn't it say anything about how good he actually is? Brock Vandagriff, a 5-star in his own right. My take here is I think Lenoris Sellers and Rocket Sanders will absolutely have a chance to dictate the tempo of this game, but with it being in Kroger Field, with what I mentioned, Deion Walker, and how good that Kentucky front seven is, and also, quite frankly, the concerns I have about South Carolina's secondary. We got ODU going bombs way over them. Like, I think the matchup South Carolina needs to win this football game, I don't see them right now. So I think Kentucky wins. I think Kentucky covers. I think the score is 27-14 Kentucky, and they get their first win in 3 tries against South Carolina and Shane Beamer and company. So let us know, man. We're here. We're here. Week 2 is upon us. If you are new to this channel, subscribe button is somewhere under your picture. Go ahead and click that because, listen, we are jumping headfirst into this thing. All right, there's no brakes. There is no taking our foot off the gas. Like, we are full steam ahead into the glorious thing that is the college football season. All right, so for Nick Brick producing the show, for myself, JD Pickell, we are back on the air tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. More predictions, talking some college football playoff bubble teams, a lot more to talk about. So make sure you're subscribed here. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.